This is Reddit's for Sleep, and as night falls, we explore the eerie side of Reddit, the unexplained, the strange, and the spine-tingling. Let these stories keep you curious, but calm. Story 1. I kept dreaming about a room that doesn't exist until I found it in a hotel from my childhood. This probably won't sound creepy to most people, but it's something that's been on my mind for a while. Maybe writing it out will help me sleep better. For as long as I can remember, or at least for the last few years, I've had this recurring dream. It's always the same. I'm walking down a hallway with dark green carpet and floral wallpaper. The lighting is soft and yellow, like old lamps in a library. The hallway always turns left, then right, then opens up to this room. The room is ordinary, mostly. It has 2 beds with faded maroon covers, a small dresser with a mirror above it, and a painting of a beach that looks just slightly off, like it was drawn from memory. But here's the strange part. It always smells like lemon, and the light hum of an old AC unit plays in the background. And there's always a suitcase in the corner. Mine. I never do anything in the dream. I just stand in the room and feel peaceful. A little sad, too, like the kind of sadness that's soft and nostalgic. Eventually, I wake up, every time, the same way, sitting on the edge of one of the beds, looking at the mirror. I never thought much of it. I chalked it up to my brain recycling visual bits and pieces from old hotel stays or random movies. But the dreams kept happening. Not every night, but often enough that I started recognizing the smallest details, like a faint stain on the carpet near the dresser. The same stain every time. Then, about a month ago, I was on a road trip across the state to help my sister move. I had been driving for hours and figured I'd stop somewhere for the night. I didn't have a specific place in mind, just pulled off at a small town with a vacancy sign glowing under some trees. The inn looked like something from a postcard. Brick walls, ivy creeping up the sides, an old sign that read, Silver Pines Inn. The woman at the front desk looked like she'd been there since the place opened. She handed me a brass key, not a card, but a literal key, and told me I'd be in room 217. Top of the stairs, turn left. As soon as I stepped into the hallway, I stopped cold. Green carpet, floral wallpaper, lamps with that soft golden glow. My heart wasn't racing, not in fear, exactly. More like awe. Deja vu, times 100. I slowly walked the path, left, then right. And then I stood in front of the door, 217. I could feel my hand shaking as I unlocked it and stepped inside. It was the room. Every detail, the beds, the dresser, the strange beach painting, the humming AC, the smell of lemon. I sat down on the bed, the one I always found myself on in the dream, and just stared at the mirror. I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel scared, just overwhelmed. There was a sense of something unfinished. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I felt like I needed to be there. I stayed the night, hardly sleeping, just lying still and watching shadows move across the ceiling. In the morning, I felt lighter somehow. I got up to stretch, and that's when I noticed the wallpaper peeling just slightly in the corner near the dresser. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. I peeled back the edge a little, and tucked inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed, fragile. It was a child's drawing, crayons, a stick figure family standing in front of the beach with a tiny hotel in the background. And in the corner, in crooked handwriting, it said, Me, Mom, and Dad at Silver Pines. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called my mom. I didn't mention the dream or the drawing. I just asked, did we ever go to a place called Silver Pines Inn when I was little? She was quiet for a second, then said, Oh, wow. Yes, you were 3. It was the last vacation we took with your dad before his job changed. I don't think I've thought about that place in 20 years. How do you even remember that? I didn't answer right away. I think I didn't remember it. Not consciously, but somewhere buried deep in my brain, that place lingered. Maybe the peaceful feeling of that room stayed with me longer than the memory itself. I don't know why I started dreaming about it again. Maybe it was just time to return to remember. I ended up leaving the drawing tucked back behind the wallpaper. It felt like it belonged there. I haven't had the dream since. But now, when I close my eyes, I can picture the room perfectly. Not as a dream, just as a memory. One I didn't even know I had. And somehow, that makes me feel like I've found a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. Story 2. My cat keeps staring at the corner of my room at 3 a.m., and then I started hearing whispers. This might sound strange, and maybe it's nothing, but I wanted to share it somewhere, and this feels like the right place. I live alone, unless you count my cat, Miso. She's a small, soft gray tabby with white socks and a pink nose. I adopted her 3 years ago after a rough breakup and a move into a new apartment. She's quiet, independent, and honestly better company than most people I've known. Everything in my life is ordinary, peaceful even. I work from home, I read a lot, I water my plants, I go to bed around midnight. No drama, no surprises. Until a few weeks ago. It started with Miso. At first, it was just something I laughed off. Around 3 a.m., she'd hop off the bed and sit at the far end of my bedroom. Always the same spot, the front left corner, where the walls meet near my closet. She'd sit there and stare up at it, not just glance stare, for long stretches of time. I figured maybe she saw a bug I couldn't see, or she liked a shadow on the wall, or who knows, cats are weird. But then I noticed she only did it at exactly the same time, 3:07 a.m. every single night. That's when it started to feel deliberate. I tried brushing it off. I'd wake up, see her sitting there like a little statue, and whisper, "Miso, come back to bed." Sometimes she would. Most of the time, she wouldn't. Then, one night, I woke up as usual and reached for my phone. 3:07, like clockwork. But this time, something was different. It was very faint, almost like static. A soft whispering sound. At first I thought it was just wind against the windows, or maybe a car passing by, but it didn't stop. It didn't sound like words at first, just a murmur, like someone talking in another room, too quiet to make out. Miso was already at the corner, sitting up straight, tail curled neatly around her feet, ears perked forward. She didn't move. I sat up and listened. The sound seemed to be coming from that corner. It wasn't threatening, not loud, just strange and oddly rhythmic, like someone reciting something slowly, over and over. I turned on the bedside lamp. The moment the light came on, the sound stopped. Miso turned around and jumped back on the bed, curling into a ball like nothing had happened. The next morning, I told myself I was probably dreaming, or maybe half asleep and imagining things. But the feeling stuck with me all day, that eerie calm, like something had been in the room with me. The next night, I left my phone recording overnight, just in case. When I checked the audio in the morning, I had to scroll to the middle of the night, and sure enough, right around 3:07, there it was. Soft, whispering sounds, just for about a minute. Still too faint to make out, but unmistakably there. This went on for several nights, always around the same time, always when Miso went to that corner. I tried everything, checking the walls for drafts or cracks, inspecting for rodents, even asking my upstairs neighbor if she'd been awake at those hours. Nothing. And she looked at me like I was asking about ghosts. Eventually, I decided to let it be. Nothing bad had happened. Miso wasn't scared. If anything, she seemed focused, calm. One night, I couldn't sleep and just lay awake, watching her. Sure enough, 3:07 came and she padded to the corner. I sat up in bed and listened. This time, the whispering was a little clearer, not louder, just easier to hear, like I had finally tuned in. A woman's voice, gentle, not speaking, but humming. It was a lullaby, soft and slow, with a melody I didn't recognize, but somehow felt like I'd heard before, like something from childhood. I didn't feel afraid. Honestly, I felt comforted. That night, I didn't turn on the light. I just let it play out. And when the humming stopped, Miso came back to the bed, stretched, and lay down next to me, purring quietly. I think the voice was never meant to scare me. It never felt dark. It felt maternal, maybe. Protective. Out of curiosity, I did some digging. I learned that my building used to be a single-family home back in the 1950s, later turned into apartments. Records were spotty, but there was mention of a family who had lived here for over 2 decades. A mother, father, and their daughter, who died young, some kind of illness. I don't know if that has anything to do with what I've experienced. Maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe I'm connecting dots that don't exist. But I've stopped trying to fight it. Now, when I wake up and see Miso at the corner, I stay still and listen. The humming is always gentle, the same tune, the same warmth. And every time it ends, Miso comes back, and I fall asleep more easily than I have in years. I don't know what it is. I don't think I need to know. All I can say is, if someone or something is there in the corner of my room at 3:07 every night, they're not trying to scare me. They're just making sure I'm not alone. Story 3. I found a locked drawer in my antique desk. The key arrived in the mail a week later. This happened a few months ago, and I still can't explain it. It's not frightening, exactly, more oddly comforting in a way that makes you question how little we really understand about the quiet things around us. So, I moved into my grandfather's old cottage earlier this year. He passed away peacefully in his sleep at 94, and the house sat untouched for almost 2 years. It's a charming, creaky place in the countryside's small garden, ivy on the windows, and the kind of silence that feels like a warm blanket instead of isolation. My grandfather had been a quiet man, a widower since his early 60s. He mostly read books, collected clocks, and wrote letters no one ever saw him send. He wasn't secretive, just private, thoughtful. The kind of man who would tell you more in the spaces between words than the words themselves. After I moved in, I spent most of the first week cleaning and rediscovering. Most of his furniture was still there, neat, clean, untouched by time. Among the pieces was his old writing desk, walnut wood, brass handles, faint scent of lavender when the drawers were opened. I remembered it from when I was little. I wasn't allowed to touch it then. It always felt sacred somehow. The kind of desk someone doesn't just own, but lives through. When I opened the desk, most of the drawers slid out easily, full of old postcards, notebooks, even a fountain pen wrapped in velvet. But one drawer on the left side didn't budge. It had a small brass keyhole with no key in sight. I tried not to obsess over it, figured the key had been lost long ago. I was tempted to force it open, but stopped myself. If my grandfather had kept it locked, maybe it was meant to stay that way. So I let it be. Exactly 1 week later, I received a small package in the mail. No return address, no note. Just a plain brown envelope, neatly taped, with my name printed in careful, looping handwriting the same way my grandfather used to write, on the birthday cards he sent me. Inside was a key. Brass. Old-fashioned. And a perfect fit for the locked drawer. I stood there for a long time with the key in my palm, heart beating slowly but heavily. It didn't feel ominous, just strange, like a moment that had been quietly waiting to happen. When I finally opened the drawer, there was no gold, no secrets, no scandal, just a single object. A music box. Small, wooden, with tiny hand-carved flowers on the lid. I remembered it faintly from my childhood, though I couldn't say how. Maybe it had sat on a shelf, quietly collecting dust and memories. I wound it carefully, half expecting nothing to happen. But the melody began to play, soft, slow, and oddly familiar. A lullaby, I think. The kind that doesn't belong to any known song, but feels like it lives inside your bones. I let it play through, watching the tiny dancer twirl slowly on her stand, her porcelain dress chipped at the hem. There was something folded underneath the music box, a note, yellowed and fragile. In my grandfather's handwriting, it said, "If you're reading this, I trust the right person found the key. Some things are meant to be unlocked when the time is right. The song played on the day you were born. Your mother used to hum it to you when you were too little to remember. Now perhaps it can help you rest when the world gets too loud. G." I read it 3 times. I think I cried, but not from sadness. There are so many things we forget, not because they don't matter, but because they were never ours to remember. The memories of others hold us in ways we'll never fully understand, like lullabies we don't remember hearing, but feel safer when we do. I keep the music box on the same desk now. I wind it up every night before bed. Just once. The melody is short, maybe 40 seconds, but it's enough. The drawer locks again on its own when I close it. I don't know how. The key sits in a small dish beside it, warm to the touch no matter how cold the room gets. Sometimes I think about that package with no return address. How it arrived right when it was meant to. Not too soon, not too late. Just quietly, calmly, at exactly the right time. Like the gentle voice of someone long gone, still looking out for you from somewhere far beyond the ticking of clocks and the limits of memory. And somehow, that helps me sleep better than I ever have. Story 4. Every night, I hear footsteps on the roof. But I live on the top floor, and there's no access. This is one of those stories that doesn't really go anywhere dramatic. No jump scares, no horror movie endings, just something strange that keeps happening, something quiet that lives in the in-between hours when the world is mostly asleep. Maybe that's why it stuck with me. I moved into this apartment about 8 months ago. It's nothing special, a top-floor unit in a 4-story building on the edge of the city. The kind of place you settle into when you're trying to save money, but still want to be close enough to life. Old brick walls, creaky pipes, and big windows that let in just enough moonlight at night. The best part about the apartment is the view trees in the distance, the faint lights of traffic below, and no one above me. No stomping, no kids running around, no 4 a.m. vacuuming. I didn't think about how rare that was until I started noticing the footsteps. The first time it happened, I thought nothing of it. Just a dull thump overhead, like someone walking across a floor in heavy boots. I figured maybe I'd misheard. The pipes bang sometimes, and old buildings have their own ways of speaking. But it kept happening. Always late sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning. Never earlier, never later, always the same, slow, deliberate footsteps. 3 or 4, then a pause. Then more, like someone pacing, not hurried, not angry, just walking. I even laughed the first few times, told myself it must be a raccoon, or maybe a very confused cat. But it didn't sound like scurrying, it sounded human, heavy enough to feel through the ceiling, rhythmic, steady. Out of curiosity, I asked the building manager if anyone had access to the roof. He shook his head and said, "No, the access door was bolted shut years ago for insurance reasons. No tenants were allowed up there. He even offered to show me the door." And sure enough, it was locked, rusted, and clearly hadn't been opened in a long time. I went back to my apartment feeling unsettled, but not scared, just confused. I even climbed out my window once to look at the roof edge. Flat, empty, nothing there. No ladders, no footprints in the dust, no signs of disturbance, just the stillness of the night and the faint breeze rolling across the gravel rooftop. But the footsteps kept coming. Same time, same pattern. At one point, I recorded the sound on my phone. It was faint, but you could hear it. Thump, thump, pause, thump, thump, like someone pacing in thought. I even brought a friend over to sleep on the couch for a few nights. I didn't say why at first, but after the second night, he asked me over breakfast, "Hey, do you ever hear, like, walking from upstairs?" That was when I knew it wasn't just me. We tried knocking on the ceiling, playing music, even staying up with the lights on. It didn't seem to make a difference. The footsteps would begin, move from one side of the ceiling to the other, and then fade. One night, after a particularly long stretch of pacing, I got up, pulled a chair to the window, and just sat quietly, waiting. Around 2:45 a.m., the sound started again. I looked up, half expecting to see a shadow through the glass, but there was nothing, just the sky. Then, something curious happened. The footsteps stopped abruptly mid-step almost, and in the silence that followed, I swear I heard a soft exhale. Like someone standing just above me had let out a slow breath, not out of fear or tension, but release. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. But it felt close. Personal. After that, things started to change. The footsteps didn't go away, but they shifted. They grew softer, more spread out. Some nights, I'd hear nothing at all. And when they did return, they felt less like pacing and more like a brief passing, as if someone was checking in just for a moment. Eventually, I stopped worrying. Stopped trying to explain it. I came to think of it like a routine. My own private visitor. Not a ghost, not a trespasser. Just someone who used to walk that roof a long time ago, and maybe never really left. I sometimes imagine it was the building's former caretaker doing one last round. Or maybe it's no one. Maybe it's the echo of memory built into the bones of old places. I keep the recordings, but I don't play them anymore. And on the rare nights when I hear the footsteps return, steady, soft, familiar, I simply pull my blanket a little higher, close my eyes, and think, whoever you are, you're not alone either. Story 5. My grandmother's mirror keeps showing people who aren't there. This isn't a scary story, really, at least not in the traditional sense. No one screams, no one dies. There's no violence or gore. It's quiet and strange and a little sad, the kind of story that lingers at the edge of your thoughts when everything else goes quiet. And it all started with a mirror. My grandmother passed away last year. She was 91, gentle and sharp as tack, until the very end. She was the kind of person who hummed while folding laundry, wrote full letters instead of texts, and believed a proper cup of tea could solve most problems. Her house was like a time capsule full of old books, lace doilies, and quiet corners. When she passed, the family came together to help sort through her belongings. Most of it was distributed photos, heirlooms, furniture. I was given a few things, including a tall standing mirror that had always been in her upstairs hallway. The mirror was beautiful, old, with a thick, ornate frame carved with roses and ivy. It wasn't flashy, just elegant, like something you'd find in a forgotten estate. As a child, I used to stare into it and imagine it led to another world. My grandmother would chuckle and say, "Maybe it does." I placed the mirror in my bedroom. It fit perfectly between two windows. Catching the morning light just right, it was comforting, in a strange way, like a piece of her still watching over me. And then the odd things began. It started with reflections that didn't quite match the room. One morning, as I was brushing my hair, I noticed the curtains in the mirror were drawn open, but when I turned, the real ones were still closed. I blinked, looked again, and everything was normal. I laughed it off, blamed sleepiness, maybe a trick of the light, but it kept happening. A few days later, I walked past the mirror and saw someone standing behind me. I turned, no one there. In the mirror, just a moment before, there had been a man, tall, thin, wearing a hat. He hadn't been moving, just standing calmly in the background like he belonged. I stood frozen, heart beating slowly but deeply, like a drum in a quiet cave. The mirror now showed only my reflection. Again, I tried to explain it away. Shadows. Overactive imagination. I told myself I was under stress, or maybe I'd been dreaming. Then came the child. I saw her in the reflection one evening. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor beside my bed, quietly playing with something, a toy or a string. I couldn't tell. She looked about 5. Long hair, white dress, no shoes. I watched her for what felt like several minutes. She never looked at me. Just kept playing. And then, as if on cue, she stood up and walked out of frame. When I turned, no one was there. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was scared. More unsettled, like I'd witnessed something private. The next morning, I moved the mirror into the hallway. I thought maybe I was spending too much time staring into it. Maybe I was creating patterns, seeing what I wanted to see. But the appearances didn't stop. No, they were just quieter. An elderly woman knitting on the old armchair that doesn't exist. A man in suspenders reading a newspaper upside down. A teenage girl brushing her hair in a mirror that isn't real. All in reflections, all in the mirror. None of them acknowledged me. I never felt threatened, never sensed anger or sadness, just presence, like memories playing out in a loop. I wasn't meant to interrupt. Eventually, I spoke to my mother about it. She went quiet for a while, then said, "You know, your grandmother always said that mirror was a little odd." I asked what she meant. She used to say it remembered things. She told me. People, mostly. Sometimes she'd talk about seeing her mother in it after she passed, or her sister. But she never said it was bad. Just sentimental. That's when I started thinking, maybe it's not haunted in the way we think. Maybe it's not ghosts or spirits trying to communicate. Maybe it's just a mirror that remembers. That holds on to the people who've stood in front of it long enough to leave a mark. Mirrors see more of us than we do of them. They see us when we're tired, unguarded, lost in thought. They watch us grow older. They hold our joy, our sadness, our quietest moments. Maybe some of that stays behind. Maybe it's not supernatural, just emotional. I kept the mirror. I still see the visitors sometimes. Not every night, not always clearly, but often enough to know it's not my imagination. I've even started saying hello. I never get a response, but that's okay. I don't think they're here to talk. I think they're just here to be remembered. And honestly, I find that peaceful. Story 6. I rented a cabin in the woods to unplug, but the landline rings. Every night at 2:17 a.m. I rented the cabin to get away. Life had become a constant stream of noise, deadlines, notifications, city traffic, emails, meetings that blurred into each other. My body was tired, but More than that, my mind was weary. So, I took a week off, turned on my out-of-office replies, and searched for somewhere remote. I found a listing for a small cabin deep in the mountains. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just trees, a fireplace, and a promise of silence. It was perfect. The owner was an older man named Robert. He met me at the trailhead with the keys and a dusty old map. Cabin's got a generator, some wood, a stocked kitchen, he said. Should be all you need, just you up there. Closest neighbor's 5 miles down the ridge. He hesitated as he handed over the keys. One thing, the cabin's got an old landline rotary. Doesn't dial out, just receives. Might ring sometimes. I blinked. You mean people call it? He shrugged. Used to. It's old. Probably just line noise. Don't worry about it. I didn't give it much thought. The hike in was beautiful. A narrow trail lined with mossy rocks, bird calls in the trees, and the occasional flutter of something small moving through the underbrush. When I arrived, the cabin was everything the listing had promised. Rustic, quiet, serene, and surrounded by the kind of stillness that makes you forget what stress even feels like. There was no signal, not even one bar. I lit the fireplace, made some tea, and spent the rest of the evening curled up with a book I hadn't touched in months. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees like an exhale. I fell asleep without setting an alarm. That night, I woke up suddenly. The sound was faint at first, like it was coming from inside a dream, but it got louder. Ring. I sat up in the dark, confused. Ring. The rotary phone on the kitchen wall was ringing. I looked at the clock on the counter. 2:17 a.m. I got out of bed slowly, my feet cold against the wooden floor. The phone continued to ring, slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. I stood in front of it for a moment, then picked up. Hello? There was nothing, just static. Not harsh, but soft, like the sound of wind across a microphone, or the hush of distant ocean waves. I said, hello? Again, quieter this time. Still nothing. I hung up. The rest of the night was uneventful. I went back to bed and chalked it up to a glitch. Old lines crackle. Maybe it was a weather thing. The next day passed peacefully. I read, journaled, made a proper meal for the first time in weeks. The kind of day that reminds you you're still human. That night, I fell asleep quickly. And again, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the phone rang. Ring. I was already awake when it started, listening. Ring. I got up, patted across the floor, and lifted the receiver. This time I heard something. Not static breathing. Soft, measured. Like someone standing still, holding the phone close to their mouth. It wasn't creepy exactly, just strange. I whispered, "Can you hear me?" The breathing stopped. And then a quiet click. They'd hung up. I didn't sleep well after that. The next morning, I tried calling out, even though Robert had said the phone didn't dial. I turned the rotary wheel slowly, just to test it. Dead tone. Still, the day was calm. Birds outside. A fox crossed the clearing once, pausing to look at me through the window before disappearing into the trees. I made soup from a can and started a puzzle I'd found in a drawer. That night, I stayed up past 2 a.m. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of tea, the phone beside me, watching the minutes tick by. 2:16, 2:17. Ring. I picked it up immediately, and this time, a voice. Faint, whispering, like it was traveling a long distance through dust and time. "Do you remember? The quiet place?" The voice was female. Old, not frightened, just tired. Like she was trying to remember something important, but couldn't quite hold on to it. I said, "What quiet place?" But the line was already fading into static. "Wait," I said. "Who are you?" And for a second, just before the call ended, I thought I heard, "You'll find it." Click. That night, I dreamt of a garden, wildflowers, stone benches, a stream, no path, just the soft rustle of leaves and the sun filtering through tall trees. It felt familiar, though I couldn't place it. I stayed in the cabin 3 more nights. Each night, the phone rang at 2:17. Each night, the same whispering voice, saying something slightly different. By the old tree. Follow the light in the morning. Don't forget, where peace waits. On my last morning, I walked into the woods behind the cabin. I hadn't explored much past the clearing before, but something pulled at me now. I walked for what felt like an hour. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. And then I saw it. An old stone bench, covered in moss, half buried beneath years of fallen leaves. Behind it stood a massive tree, twisted, ancient, with thick roots curling into the ground like fingers holding the earth still. I sat. For a long time. And I understood. It wasn't about ghosts or hauntings. It was memory. That cabin, that phone, that place they held echoes. Fragments of quiet moments shared long ago. Maybe a couple who used to come here years back. Maybe someone who once found peace here and simply never wanted to leave. Maybe the land remembers. Maybe the land calls back those who need it most. I left the cabin later that day, but I still think about the calls. I still remember the voice, not frightened, not lost, just gentle. Like someone offering you a cup of tea after a long day. Like someone reminding you that even in the noise of the world, there are still places where silence lives. And sometimes, all it takes is a phone that rings at 2:17 in the morning and the courage to answer. Story 7. The library on the edge of town only appears when you're lost. I'm not the kind of person who gets lost. Not literally, at least. I'm good with directions, good with maps. My memory for streets and landmarks is solid, so when I took that late-night drive to clear my head, I didn't think twice about where I was going. I just drove, letting the roads take me somewhere quiet. It had been a rough week, one of those weeks where everything feels like it's sliding out of place. Work stress, a falling out with an old friend, and a general sense of being untethered. I didn't want to be home. I didn't want to be anywhere I was expected to be. I just needed air, darkness, the feeling of being somewhere that didn't ask anything of me. It was close to midnight when I realized I didn't know where I was. I'd been driving on winding back roads for over an hour. No GPS, no music, just the soft hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. Trees arched over the road like an old tunnel. Mist gathered in the dips of the hills. No signs, no gas stations, no lights. And then I saw it. A small sign at the side of the road. Public library, 0.3 miles. I almost didn't believe it. A library? Out here? But I was curious, and more than that, I needed a place to sit, breathe, and maybe remind myself how to feel normal again. The road narrowed, became gravel, then dirt. Just as I started to think I'd made a mistake, the trees opened into a small clearing. And there it stood. A modest brick building, 2 stories tall, with warm golden light glowing from its tall windows. Ivy climbed the sides. A single lamppost flickered by the entrance. There were no other cars, no people, just the sound of crickets and the low rustle of wind through the trees. I parked and walked up the steps. The front door opened with a gentle chime, like a bell in a quiet shop. Inside, it smelled of old books, wood polish, and something floral lavender maybe. The kind of scent that makes you exhale without realizing you are holding your breath. The library was silent, but not empty. A few people sat at tables, reading. A woman in a green cardigan shelved books in the corner. No one looked up. No one seemed surprised to see me. The shelves were tall and curved slightly, like waves. I wandered through them, slowly, running my fingers along the spines. The books didn't have call numbers. Some didn't have titles, but they felt intentional, like they were meant for someone specific. I picked one at random. No title, just a pale blue cover. I sat down in an armchair near a small window and began to read. It was a story about a man who lost his way not just on the road, but in his life. He didn't know who he was anymore. Every choice felt like a weight. Every silence like a judgment. He wandered into the woods one night and found a place where he could sit with himself, quietly, without being asked to be anything. I read it cover to cover. When I looked up, the clock on the wall said 3:14 a.m. I hadn't noticed the time pass. I stood, returned the book to the shelf, and made my way to the desk at the front. An older woman sat there, her hair in a silver braid. She smiled as I approached. "Find what you needed?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "Can I check it out?" She shook her head gently. "Books here don't leave, but they stay with you." I nodded, unsure what to say. She handed me a small card with a quote handwritten on it. "When you're most lost, you find what matters most." I slipped it into my pocket, thanked her, and walked back out into the night. The library was still warm behind me, glowing like a lantern in the dark. When I got back in the car, the GPS flickered back to life. My phone had signal again. I was less than 20 minutes from my apartment. I don't know how that's possible. I've tried finding the library again since then. Same route, same roads, nothing. The sign's gone. The clearing is just trees now. No path, no gravel, no building. I asked around local forums, a few people in town. Some said it sounded familiar. Others claimed their grandparents had told stories of a library like that back before the highways were built. Most just shrugged. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, when I feel untethered again, not afraid, just drifting, I think about that library. I think about the quiet it held, the weight it helped lift. And I wonder if maybe, just maybe, places like that don't appear on maps because they're not meant to. They appear when you're lost. And when you leave, you're a little more found than before. Story 8. Every new tenant in my apartment gets the same note, and I finally left one too. I moved into my current apartment 5 years ago. It's an old building tucked between a laundromat and a flower shop, the kind of place people pass without noticing. 4 floors, no elevator, creaky stairs, and hallways that always smell faintly of dust and fabric softener. Nothing fancy, just lived in. I was fresh out of a breakup, jobless, and trying to start over in a quieter corner of the city. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was quiet, and the apartment 3B had big windows that let in soft morning light. On my first day, while unpacking boxes in the tiny kitchen, I found a note stuck to the inside of the top cupboard. "Welcome. Don't worry, the feeling fades. Leave one when you're ready." It wasn't signed. Just that. Written in blue ink on a yellow sticky note. At the time, I laughed. It sounded like one of those cryptic motivational things someone would post on Instagram. I peeled it off, stuck it to the fridge for a while, then eventually tossed it into a drawer and forgot about it. But something about it lingered in my mind. The feeling fades. At first I thought maybe it referred to how strange it is moving into a new space, the awkwardness of calling a place home when it still smells like the last person's detergent. Or maybe it meant something deeper, the loneliness that sneaks up when your life resets unexpectedly. In the first few weeks, I definitely felt it. The silence at night was louder than I expected. The walls made strange clicks and pops as temperature changed. My upstairs neighbor had heavy feet, and someone on the first floor practiced the violin, not well, but often. But over time, the apartment grew around me, or I grew into it. I found a job I didn't hate, made friends at the cafe down the street, bought a secondhand rug that made the living room feel warmer, hung up pictures, burned candles. Life got quieter, then softer. Eventually, the note faded into memory, a strange welcome from someone I'd never know. Over the years, I got curious. I began casually asking my neighbors how long they'd lived in their units. Most were fairly new. People came and went. Rent prices changed. Lives shifted. But I noticed something odd. Every person I talked to who lived in the B units, 1B, 2B, 4B, all had a similar story. Each one had found a note when they moved in. Always handwritten, always unspecific. Messages like, "It's okay to take your time. You're not as alone as you think. This space knows how to hold people. Let it." None were signed, none had explanations. I began keeping track in a little notebook. Over 2 years, I collected 5 different notes from neighbors willing to share or who had taken photos before throwing theirs away. They all carried the same tone, gentle, comforting, slightly eerie in their anonymity. And all ended the same way. Leave one when you're ready. It became a quiet fascination. Who started it? Was it a tradition passed down from one tenant to the next? A long-forgotten act of kindness that spiraled into a tradition? Or something stranger? I never found out. But I thought about it more as the years passed. 5 years in, I was no longer the same person who moved in heartbroken and unsure. My job had turned into a small business. My circle of friends was wide, kind, and steady. I'd painted the kitchen walls a soft sage green. I kept fresh herbs in the windowsill. I even started sleeping without background noise, something I hadn't been able to do in years. The apartment had become a part of me, or maybe I had become part of it. Last month, I got news that changed things. A job offer in another city. A big opportunity. One I couldn't pass up. And just like that, I was packing again. My last night in 3B was quiet. I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, with a mug of tea and the weight of 5 years resting gently on my shoulders. I thought about that first note. About all the unnamed people who had stood in this kitchen, felt the same uncertainty, and somehow passed along their presence in just a few words. And so, I wrote mine. On a fresh yellow sticky note, with a smooth pen, I wrote, "This place held me while I found myself again. It will hold you too. Be patient. The warmth comes. Leave one when you're ready." I stuck it inside the top cupboard, where mine had once been. And then, I closed the door. I don't know who lives in 3B now. I don't know if they've found the note, but I hope they do. And I hope one day, when their life softens and their burdens ease, they'll write one too. And the quiet tradition will continue a whisper between strangers, telling each other, "You'll be okay." Story 9. The town where everyone waves, even if they don't know you. I moved to Sycamore Ridge a few months ago, a small town nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, about 3 hours from the city. The kind of place where the grocery store still has a bulletin board full of handwritten notes, and every diner has 3 kinds of pie on the menu. I came here for peace. After years of constant noise deadlines, sirens, screens, always being on, I needed somewhere quiet. I found Sycamore Ridge by accident. A listing popped up online for a small house with a wraparound porch and a garden already blooming with wildflowers. I drove out, toured it, and made an offer the same day. There was something about it, not just the house, but the place. It felt calm, like the town exhaled slowly. On my very first day, something odd happened. I was driving down Main Street in my little hatchback, going about 25 miles an hour. An older man was walking his dog on the sidewalk. As I passed, he lifted his hand in a lazy wave. Nothing dramatic, just a soft, familiar gesture. I smiled and waved back, thinking maybe he'd mistaken me for someone else. But then it happened again. A woman unloading groceries waved as I parked. Two kids biking down the hill waved as they passed my mailbox. Even the mailman gave me a casual salute as I watered my front lawn. It kept happening. Every day, every street, every person. Young or old, dressed up or in pajamas, people waved. Always gently, always without hesitation. At first, I thought it was just small-town friendliness, but it went beyond that. People here waved even when they weren't making eye contact. Even when you were passing them in the dark. Even when it was pouring rain. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Winthrop, about it. She's in her 70s. With soft gray curls and a voice that sounds like warm tea. "Oh, the waving," she said, smiling. "It's just what we do. Been that way forever." "But why?" I asked. "What started it?" She paused, then shrugged. "I suppose we just believe in acknowledging each other. It's nice to be seen, even for a second." That answer stayed with me. I tried to imagine what the city would have felt like if people had waved more. Maybe it wouldn't have fixed everything, but maybe it would have helped. As the weeks passed, I got used to the rhythm of the town. Waves in the morning, waves during walks. A nod and a lift of the hand as you pass someone on a trail or a dusty side road. But then I noticed something else. It wasn't just people waving at people. Sometimes I'd see someone wave at nothing. A man would tip his hat at an empty bench. A child would wave out the car window at a tree. Mrs. Winthrop once looked up from her rose bushes and gave a little wave toward the side yard where no one stood. I thought maybe I was imagining things, or maybe it was just habit, a twitch, a reflex. But one evening, something happened that made me think twice. It was just after sunset. I was walking the trail behind my house, a path lined with birch trees and quiet moss. The air smelled like leaves and fading sun. Ahead of me was a girl, maybe 8 or 9, walking with a small backpack and a slow, wandering pace. She hadn't seen me yet. Suddenly, she stopped, turned to the right, and waved into the trees. No one was there. I slowed my steps, trying not to startle her. When I caught up, I said gently, "Evening. Did you see something out there?" She looked up at me with a kind of wisdom far beyond her years. "Oh," she said, "I was just waving." "To who?" She smiled. "You don't always have to know." And then she skipped ahead. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. You don't always have to know. There's something strangely comforting about that idea. That maybe a wave, a simple human gesture, doesn't always need a reason. It can be for a person, a memory, a feeling, even for something you can't quite see, but somehow sense. Some locals say Sycamore Ridge is a thin place, a spot where the world is a little closer to something else. I don't know if I believe in that, but I do know that this town feels different. It feels soft. It feels watched over. And every time I wave, whether to a neighbor, a dog, or a stretch of empty road, I feel a little more at peace. I've started waving first now, even when I'm alone. Even when I'm not sure anyone's looking. And maybe that's the point. Story 10. The night my door opened, but no one was there. It was a quiet Tuesday night, One of those nights where everything outside feels softened by the rain tapping gently on the window panes. I had just finished reading and was settling in for bed when it happened. I live alone in a small apartment on the third floor of an old brick building downtown. The neighborhood is usually peaceful after dark, a few streetlights, the distant hum of traffic, and the occasional bark of a dog. Nothing ever really unsettled me here. But that night, just as I was about to switch off my bedside lamp, I heard it, the soft creak of my front door opening. At first I thought I must have left it unlocked. Maybe I forgot to latch it properly after coming home. But something about the sound felt different. Slower, quieter, like the door was easing open by itself. I held my breath. The room was still dark, except for the dim glow from the hallway light. I got out of bed slowly, my feet making soft thuds on the carpet. As I walked toward the door, the air felt cooler, heavier. I reached out and grabbed the doorknob. It was warm, like someone had just held it. I pulled the door open. No one was there. The hallway was empty and silent. The only sound was the gentle patter of rain outside. I stepped out and looked left and right. No footprints in the wet floor outside the building's entrance. No sign that anyone had been there at all. I closed the door carefully and locked it twice. My heart was still beating a little too fast. I told myself it must have been the wind. Old doors in old buildings have their quirks. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, just beyond sight. That night, I left a small light on by the door and sat awake for a while, watching the shadows move softly on the walls. In the following days, I found little things that didn't make sense. My favorite book, left open on the coffee table, was flipped to a different page. A chair was slightly turned from where I'd left it. My keys were on the counter, but the little keychain light was on. No one else has a key. I asked my neighbors. No one reported seeing anyone around. No signs of a break-in or disturbance. Just these small, quiet things. One evening, I started writing about it, the door opening, the little changes in a notebook. I wrote about the rain, the silence, the feeling of presence that wasn't quite visible. A presence that felt neither threatening nor frightening. More like a soft watcher, a gentle guardian. Sometimes, when I feel the weight of the day or the loneliness of living alone, I think about that night. Maybe it was a visitor from a place we don't see. Maybe it was the spirit of the building itself, easing my fears without making noise. Or maybe it was a reminder. A reminder that even when we feel alone, there's something quietly nearby, watching, waiting, holding space for us. And sometimes the smallest things, a door opening without a breeze, a book page turning, are the world's way of saying, you're not alone. You're seen. You're safe. So now, every night before bed, I leave the door slightly ajar. Not because I expect someone to come in, but because I know sometimes the quietest presence is the most comforting. And that's enough. If you're still here, I hope these stories helped you drift closer to rest. Let me know which one stood out to you the most. I always love reading your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Reddit's for sleep, so you never miss a night of calm stories. Sleep well, and I'll see you tomorrow. A book page turning are the world's way of saying, you're not alone. You're seen. You're safe. So now, every night before bed, I leave the door slightly ajar. Not because I expect someone to come in, but because I know sometimes the quietest presence is the most comforting. And that's enough. If you're still here, I hope these stories helped you drift closer to rest Let me know which one stood out to you the most. I always love reading your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Reddit's for sleep, so you never miss a night of calm stories. Sleep well, and I'll see you tomorrow.